You're not going to dance, no.
Not the dancing. And it's lovely to see so many familiar faces and some new faces as well. And I have to resort to my notes because I can't speak off the cuff. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to speak a few words about a personal hero of mine, whose revered memory we are gathered here to honor. I'd like to thank Ruwan, Mahendra, and members of the Sri Lanka Literary Association for giving that opportunity to me wholeheartedly. In an essay on morality, Professor Fonseka categorized basic human needs as affection, belonging, knowledge, creative activity, excitement, and freedom. When you think about it, these needs are exactly what's fulfilled by the Sri Lanka Literary Society. Affection, belonging, knowledge, creative activity, excitement, and freedom. So thank you all once again. Professor Carlo Fonseka, born in 1933 and pet named Carlo by the universe of his admirers, was a rare human being. He excelled in the sciences, the arts, education, administration, and in politics. Each one of his talents would merit a talk of its own. I chose the topic life lessons for a reason. Some of you I know in the audience have quite literally had lessons on life from him as in his capacity as your lecturer in physiology. I sadly didn't, and I know very little about Carlo, the teacher. I've known him for 4 decades, but only as a beloved family friend. His sense of humor, thirst for knowledge, and scintillating skill in telling anecdotes, usually self-deprecating ones, made him delightful company. He was a mentor to me and had a profound influence, positive influence on me and many like me at a personal level. Writing about his lifelong friend and probably the greatest Sri Lankan novelist, Martin Wickramasinghe, Professor Fonseka says, and I quote, "Every now and then, when we were together in his study, talking about literature, culture, evolution, politics, Buddhism, Marxism, whatever, I felt an impulse to hug the old man, to show him how grateful I was for talking to me so learnedly for so many precious hours," unquote. I felt an impulse to hug the old man, to show him how grateful I was. Ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly how I felt whenever I met Professor Carlo Fonseka. His heroes, his own heroes, were a pantheon of witty atheists like Bertrand Russell, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Charles Darwin, Daniel Dennett, and more recently, Noah Harari. Every time we met, we talked about a different subject. He never ran out of interesting topics, stories to tell, aphorisms, anecdotes, jokes, usually about politicians or famous people. He'd recite from memory passages from books he had read. And what a memory that was. I mean, it's unbelievable what he remembers vividly. I particularly remember the opening paragraph of Bertrand Russell's autobiography he recited. It goes like this. "3 passions, simple but overwhelmingly strong, have governed my life. The longing for love, the search for knowledge, and the unbearable pity for the suffering of mankind." This statement, I think, applies equally to Professor Carlo Fonseka as it does to Bertrand Russell. And he would continue quoting Russell. "I have sought love because in the union of love, I have seen in a mystic miniature the prefiguring vision of the heaven that saints and poets have imagined. I found this statement very moving. In the union of love, I have seen the vision of heaven that saints and poets have imagined. At this point, I have a confession to make. After hearing this from Professor Fonseka, I saw its potential, memorized it myself, and shamelessly used it to serenade someone I was pursuing at the time.
Good man, good man.
In the union of love, I have seen the vision of heaven that saints and poets have imagined. I was very grateful to him for that. And I must say, I must emphasize, this was a very long time ago, when I was younger.
Did it work?
Moving swiftly on.
Was it the love bit or the union of love bit?
I'm a union man. Professor Fonseka was always mindful of the teaching of Socrates that what we most need to know is how we ought to live. He was keen to derive universally valid principles of human morality from scientific rationality. So this brings us to the question, how does a rational person conduct oneself? The first thing you notice about him, when you get to know him, is his humility. He treated everyone with respect. My lasting memory of him was the first time I met him when I was 9 years old. He would buy me chocolates and talk to me. I mean, I'm a total stranger to him, but he'd still spend time with you talking like very interesting things about wildlife or life in general. And his kindness towards me, genuine interest in me, and his engagement with a child of my age, it filled me with joy. And I developed a huge respect for the great man straight away. And he had this effect on everyone he met. I mean, if he came to this room, he'd talk to every one of you and have a genuine conversation with each one of you. And he had this effect on everyone who, even people who didn't agree with him, who didn't see eye to eye on issues at hand. And not many people know that he was offered the post of Minister of Health by a two-term former president, and he politely declined. The posts he actually held were carefully chosen from among the many he was offered, and he took only those responsibilities that were aligned with the causes that were dear to his heart. So the chairpersonship of the National Authority on Tobacco and Alcohol was one of those roles that he played. Scientific rationality cannot provide answers to questions such as purpose or destiny of humankind. If our brief existence on earth is an insignificant lucky coincidence, how does one add purpose to it? Professor Fonseka's answer was kindness. He added purpose to his life by attempting to reduce the suffering of others. I'm sure many of you would know this firsthand. As many here would agree, he was a first-rate teacher. His students still remember the principles of physiology that he taught them half a century ago. He was an excellent communicator, and his formidable prowess in this aspect owed its splendor to his being a book lover. So this is his writing desk at the age of 86. So he had actually moved this from his study into the living room. The living room overlooks, has a nice view from it, and he's moved the study desk there. So when you enter his house, this is what you see. So he read, he's simultaneously reading or delving into all these books. And there's a study at the back of the house full of other books that he's read or he's reading. He read voraciously and with a purpose. This is something I've not witnessed in many people. Whatever he reads with a purpose. And with a ruler and in red ink, he would underline anything of importance and make notes on it. So this is a practice that he has cultivated from the time he was a teenager, I think. And even to this day, if you give him a book, he would read it and underline stuff that he finds important. Thus, he was able to glean and commit to memory the salient points. His wide reading allowed him to present these points to others in an interesting and engaging way, sprinkled with pearls from literature and humorous anecdotes. He used to tell this story about why he became a potgulla or a bookworm. So in medical school, he had done extremely well in his second MB exam. And his name was at the top of the list of students who had passed. You tell the story to the
No, but I had the video. We'll show it later.
Yes.
But you relay the story.
So he's topped the batch, and his name is on the list. And he had overheard two pretty girls talking about this. One said, "Carlo batch top karla ne?" Like, yeah, very bright ne? Like, Carlo has topped the batch. He's such a smart guy. To which the other girl replied, "You know what, last time ne? Shame he's not good looking." He says he cried all night and determined from that day onwards. These are like all yarns, I don't think he did. He says he cried all night and determined from that day onwards to become a bookworm for the rest of his life. So his love of books was such that in his actual will, he bequeathed to his only son and sole heir, as his most precious legacy, a signed copy of the book Climbing Mount Improbable, given to him by its author, Richard Dawkins. So this was his most precious legacy. This, by the way, is my most prized possession. This was a gift from Professor Fonseka 6 months before he passed away, saying that he didn't think he would need it anymore. The person who gave it to him had inscribed the words, "In remembrance of the happy hours spent with the old Khayyam." This is a familiar post to everyone, I think. This is Professor Fonseka in full flow at some meeting against alcohol and tobacco abuse. Through lifelong battles against the mighty tobacco industry, alcohol abuse and pollution, he attempted to minimize human suffering. He reserved his particular venom for those whom he called merchants of death, who marketed alcohol and tobacco to children. So I told you I first saw him when I was 9. He was on a speaking tour against tobacco and alcohol abuse. He carried a sheaf of glossy magazines with him. I'm sure most of you will remember these. They had pictures of beautiful women gathered around a smoker on a yacht. Some of you might have seen these adverts before movies as well in Sri Lanka, right? You have these Rothmans ads and Benson Hedges ads. The picture they painted was like a dream world with yachts and beautiful people and people smoking away. So holding this magazine up, he said to the audience, what they want you to believe is that if you smoke this particular brand of cigarette, these lovely women will gather around you and you'll become a very popular person. And even as a 9-year-old boy, his power of communication was such that I got the message. It was amazing. I don't know whether Ruan talked about his fire walking. Ruan will talk about his experiments on firewalking. Following the footsteps of Dr. Abraham T. Kaur, more about him later, Professor Fonseka strived to educate people on scientific thinking and the principle of cause and effect. He wanted to emancipate exploited masses from the shackles of blind faith and superstition. What he espoused was the Buddhist concept of ehi passiko, come and see for yourself. This is his family, as Pasika showed. His wife Pearl, son Suranga, daughter Idunil, and granddaughter whom you saw dance a little while ago, Tarya. Another life lesson he taught me was that what matters ultimately is love and human relationships. Relationships with your loved ones, your dear friends, your relatives, and your colleagues. His parenting formula was simple and successful. Have them, love them, and let them grow up and live as they please. I'm glad my parents took a leaf out of his book as well. Until the very last, he made it a point to have lunch together with his wife, son, and daughter every day. So while the cognitive part of his acute brain remained focused on the narrow medical discipline of physiology, the emotional part was drawn to art. This is the aspect of his mind which sought its outlet in creativity, particularly in poetry. The poet T.S. Eliot once said that genuine poetry begins to communicate before you understand the meaning of the words. Sri Lankan music fans have,
Sir, repeat that again.
he said, genuine poetry begins to communicate before you understand the meaning of the words. Sri Lankan music fans have embraced songs such as Rattarandue, which you heard a little while ago, and Ruduru Turuvalule, which he wrote for his wife.
That's for the daughter.
The Ruduru Turuvalule was for his wife, and Rattarandue obviously was for his daughter. It's not merely their melodiousness that has endeared them to us, but also the strength of emotion of the lyrics, even before we fully understand the words. Hopefully we'll sing a few of those in the session afterwards. He wrote a song called Dhanayata Ai Dadi Asha, meaning why this lust for wealth. Have you heard that song? Dhanayata Ai Dadi Asha. This again is something he lived by, and because he never pursued material wealth. Dhanayata Ai Dadi Asha, why this lust for wealth. Now the musical arrangement for this song was by someone who didn't speak Sinhala. So the lyrics were given to him written in English. In English, the word dhanaya, meaning wealth, had been written as T-H-A-N-A-Y-A. T for Tom, H-A-N-A-Y-A. Which could also be read as Thanaya, meaning breast. So the poor musician had wondered why this eminent professor was writing a song called Thanaya Tai Dadi Asha, meaning why this lust for breast, and had quietly inquired, "Sir, is it because we are all mammals?" Another person he dearly loved was his nephew, the film idol and politician Vijay Kumar Tunga. Vijay, as some of you may remember, was cruelly assassinated in 1988 at the age of 42. Carlo had hoped Vijaya would lead a third political movement in Sri Lanka, which was socialist, secular, and non-racial. And Vijaya's growing popularity made him a target for the vigilante groups in operation at the time.
You're being polite there. In fact, Vijay, when he went to mediate peace between the government and the Tigers at the time, came to faculty, got the blessings from Carlo, and went. And the DJB wing of the JVP never forgave Carlo for that.
I see.
That is where the threat of, the Vimal Veeravans, Atula Sumatipala, that faction, never forgave him for that stand that he took from that. That is where the threat for his life came.
That explains a lot, actually.
Yeah.
Thank you. In a nationally televised moving speech at Vijay's funeral, which is Professor Carlo Fonseka at his funeral, where he echoed the words of Mark Antony at Julius Caesar's funeral, Professor Fonseca bravely expressed defiance against these evil forces. And this eventually forced him and his family into exile in Helsinki for a few years.
In fact, there was an event in the faculty where he spoke, Carlo spoke. It was a debate between Carlo and Atula Sumatipala. And Atula was somebody whom we looked up to as a sort of a socialist, Marxist kind of guy. But the other faction of he had the DJB side to him, and he literally tore into Carlo Fonseca, and it came as a real surprise. This was either just before or just after Vijay got killed.
I see. At this point, I must say I'm not going to. I promise not to speak about another one of Professor Fonseca's nephews, who's been making waves in the media in the last week or so. Another great friend of Professor Fonseka was the legendary dramatist Professor Sarat Chandra. In his play Singabahu, there is a well-known song called Gallena Vidala. The story goes like this. A lion falls in love with a princess, abducts her, as you do, and imprisons her in a cave. They have a son and a daughter. The son, Singabahu, meaning arms of a lion, grows up and becomes a strong lad. He becomes so strong that one day he's able to move the large rock covering the entrance to the cave and escape with his mother and sister. When the lion discovers this, it becomes very angry and also at the same time heartbroken. That's when the lion sings the song Gallena Vidala. A famous line in the song goes, Mama dana gatemi, mama saka kalemi, meaning I knew it and I suspected it. The lion basically says he had premonitions of what happened basically. I knew it and I suspected it. Now, ever the scientist, Professor Fonseka was puzzled by this phrase. Surely, he thought, the suspicion must come before the knowing. So shouldn't the phrase instead be Mama saka kalemi, Mama dana gatemi, or I suspected it and I knew it, rather than the other way around. He was so puzzled by this that he asked about this from Professor Sarat Chandra several times without getting a satisfactory answer. And he persisted. When he persisted, Professor Sarat Chandra had got really angry and had said, I say Singhavini, Sattva Tamai. Meaning, look, it's a lion, animals are like that. The final life lesson he gave me is a somber one. How does a rational mind come to terms with its own mortality? Where does one find solace if there is no belief in an afterlife or salvation? Professor Fonseka had the answer. His answer was curiosity. He himself had been at the bedside of two of his heroes when they passed away. The first was the great leftist politician, Dr. N.M. Pereira. He was both a doctor of philosophy and doctor of science, eminent scholar. He had a huge influence on Professor Fonseka's political outlook. And Dr. Pereira's far-sighted speech in 1956 during the parliamentary debate on the Official Language Act arguing that both Sinhala and Tamil should be official languages in Sri Lanka was what actually attracted Professor Fonseka to politics.
In fact, his exact words were one language, two countries, two language, one country.
That's it. And the second person,
Dr. Colin said that.
okay. The second person Professor Fonseka was at the bedside at the time of death was Dr. Abraham T. Kaur. Dr. Kaur believed that happy human societies could be built by attacking superstition vigorously, and he dedicated his life to doing so. To the last day of his life, he had been working like fury to liberate his fellow countrymen from what he called superstition. If he was sometimes seen to be dogmatic, it was out of humane concern for his fellow countrymen who have been systematically swindled by gurus, swamis, astrologers, palmists, yogis, rishis, spiritualists, and their ilk. So one of these greats had been extremely fearful of death, and the other calm and philosophical about it. It's in this latter state, in a calm and philosophical state, that I witnessed Professor Fonseka in his final days. Until his dying breath, he was curious about unraveling the mysteries of the physical world through science, curious about unraveling the mysteries of the mind through art, curious about better ways of navigating this short passage of time we call life. The fear, uncertainty, and foreboding of an incurious mind was not for him. If we are unconcerned about the vast emptiness we endured before birth, before that sperm and egg met, why should we fear the same emptiness after death? His parting words to me 3 weeks before he died, and this is a person who's coming in and out of consciousness due to being heavily sedated. His parting words to me were, "Son, please bring me a book called Deep Medicine by Eric Topol when you come next time." His was a superior intellect, adorned with diligently acquired jewels of literature, whose sparkle shone through his wit and eloquence. His insatiable curiosity not merely sharpened his faculties, but also elevated his humanism. His kindness to ordinary people knew no bounds. Presidents and paupers sought his advice and help. Each one who approached him knew that he'd be genuine, wouldn't expect a reward, and would use his copious reserves of knowledge and human connections to help. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm eternally indebted for the life lessons he gave me in humility, kindness, love, and curiosity. I leave you with lyrics from a song written by Professor Fonseka, which he adapted from a poem by Omar Khayyam. I think the adaptation, this is the original poem by Omar Khayyam, and the adaptation I feel is even more poignant than the original. With apologies to those who don't read Sinhala, these are the first and last lines of the song. Koida kiya, manda kiya, nodana aveni, maru katare sulagalese, taniva pitareni.
We are going to sing all of those songs.
Thank you.
At the next session. And you lead.
And the rough translation of this is, I came not knowing from where or why, and leave alone like wind over deserts dry. I cannot think of a better summary of the rationalist creed that Professor Fonseka held so dear. I came not knowing from where or why, and leave alone like wind over deserts dry. The French poet Anatole France, attempting to summarize the history of man on earth, came up with a 7-word phrase: He was born, he suffered, he died. To summarize the life of Professor Carlo Fonseka, I paraphrase it thus. He was born, he illuminated, he died. Thank you.
I expected something special, but that was extra special. Thank you very much. You really communicate to us the way he thought, the way he felt, and his relations with you. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Don't you agree?
Yeah.